Qantas and Qatar Airways are at war. In the latest battle, Qantas has thrown the grenade at Qatar Airways, with the collateral damage being expensive tickets for you and me. I'm about to tell you the story about their beef and how we got to where we are today. Let's get into it. To understand how we got here, we need to go back 10 years to 2013. Qantas's other arch-enemy, Virgin Australia, was waging its own war on the national carrier. They were determined to put on more capacity and capture as much market share as possible. The trouble was, they had limited wide-body aircraft and no realistic prospects on competing on the so-called kangaroo route from Australia to London. Enter Etihad. Virgin Australia was able to partner with the national carrier of the UAE to not only offer services to London, but one-stop options to Europe, Asia, and Africa. This was a huge blow to Qantas, who was partnered with British Airways at the time, meaning passengers who didn't want to go to London had to make 2 stops to get where they needed to be. Let's not forget British Airways' glory days were a distant memory. I mean, they sometimes still use this dorm room and call it business class. Qantas knew it had to act, and they broke it off with British Airways and formed an alliance with Emirates to fight Virgin Australia and Etihad. This angered Qatar Airways in multiple ways. It was bad enough that Emirates was their fiercest rival, but the true betrayal was felt due to the fact that Qatar and Qantas are supposed to be allies within the One World Alliance. I mean, what's the point of an alliance if you're going to stab your allies in the back? But don't take my word for it. Here's Qatar Airways CEO in no uncertain terms.
Ross, for me to tell you is that as part of One World, Qantas should be working with us, not with other airlines, in the spirit of the alliance. However, as they are working with a competitor of mine, I have the full right to work with another airline in Australia to develop our relationship and to serve the Australian people.
If there was any more doubt about this, Qantas renewed the deal with Emirates in 2018 and again in 2023. This has severely limited Qatar's ability to appeal to the Australian customer. They pay their One World membership but can't market to Qantas's customer base. A pretty raw deal if you ask me. This was bad, but it's about to get a whole lot worse. Now, if you enjoy aviation content like this, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next video. The pandemic was tough on everyone, and the airline industry was probably the worst affected. Understandably, airlines grounded their fleets and operated few, if any, flights. But not Qatar Airways. They were one of the few airlines who operated an almost regular schedule during the pandemic and was single-handedly responsible for bringing thousands of Australians home. They even increased their capacity into Australia. I, for one, know a few Australians who arrived home safely thanks to Qatar Airways. Qantas, on the other hand, only operated a handful of repatriation flights. It was really hard to know who the real national carrier was. One didn't want to bring home citizens and was firing people, while Qatar Airways was doing the complete opposite. Qatar Airways once again highlighted Qantas's hypocrisy. Qatar is constantly accused by Qantas of receiving government handouts when Qantas themselves received billions of handouts from the Australian government during COVID-19. Tensions only grew more and more between the One World rivals. So with that out of the way, surely bringing Australians home during their time of need worked in favour with the Australian government. Surely they were appreciative of Qatar Airways, right? well... And so here we are in 2023, post-pandemic, and Qatar Airways wants to expand their operations in Australia. At the moment, they only have permission to operate 28 weekly services to major Australian cities. This is very reasonable, as Emirates is allowed to offer almost 4 times as many services. Qatar was only requesting permission to increase the 28 weekly services to 49 weekly services. Did they look after the airline who looked after their citizens during the pandemic? Nope. The Australian government, heavily lobbied by Qantas, actively stopped competition from coming to Australian shores. More competition would have meant lower prices from already high airfares, but once again, the Australian government would much rather look after the interests of a big corporation over the ordinary citizen. Let's not forget that Qantas is about to make a record profit this year. Qantas claims the disingenuous excuse of too much competition costing jobs. Qatar Airways once again sees right through the hypocrisy, as during the pandemic, Qantas illegally dismissed many workers and now has a much lower headcount. These job cuts had nothing to do with Qatar Airways, and this decision has nothing to do with jobs, but everything to do with politics. Anthony Albanese and Catherine King, do better. If you are an Australian citizen, I encourage you to write to the Prime Minister and Transport Minister and tell them what a disgraceful decision this is. What do you think? Do you think the Australian government should have provided these landing slots to Qatar Airways? Leave a like and comment below. As always, thanks for watching, and until next time, keep flying high.